Good day, everyone. Welcome to a really concise roadmap on the issues of long COVID. I'm Dr. Martin Wucher, speaking from Namibia. This has been my involvement for the last 3 years, and I just want to summarize what we know at this stage. I want to give you a really nice list of research so that you have more information to work on. Over the last 3 years, we've had a huge amount of conflicting information. Every one of us has tried to find their way through this maze of knowledge, information that was thrown at us 24/7. In fact, we're pretty tired. Most people are sick and tired of this thing. Most want to just get on with life, and yet there are some people that have had a lot of issues after COVID. They fall under the category of long COVID. And this is what we're going to do today. So my encouragement to you is stop feeling guilty, stop feeling scared. Go and look, ask a lot of questions, and listen to information that's coming from wherever you want to get it. A little warning, this is not medical advice. It is a summary of scientific research, and you can basically use it for information and to find your way around and what you want to do in future. For medical treatment, please go to your qualified and trusted doctor and try not to do everything yourself. So this is how it works here. We have 3 types of slides. The first one is basically a screenshot of a research article. You will see the references at the bottom. The second slide will be extracts from that text. I've copy and pasted them so that you can read the original text for your own interest. Please note that this is reasonably scientific. I've introduced this for doctors and people that have got a biological knowledge. Maybe they can follow that, they find it interesting. And then the third one is basically a summary of what was discussed, say, in that article or in the previous slide. So this is for the normal day-to-day summary. If you want a quick table of what's happening, you can go to this type of slide. What is long COVID and why are so many people struggling with it? I've pulled out a couple of very common symptoms. People don't feel well. They can sort of carry on with daily life in certain cases, but they don't feel the same. They're always tired. They can't remember things. They don't sleep very well. Many of them have headaches and other pains. Body pains, muscle pains. They struggle to breathe properly, and they've got this sort of nagging cough that doesn't go away. They can't exercise like they used to, and then in certain cases there's pain in hands and feet and all sorts of other symptoms that pop up. So if you hear that, switch on your thinking cap, look at how many people you have heard talking about these issues. What is the reason behind this? And this is what we are going to try and show you now. And then also, what can we do about it? The last 3 years have shown us that coronaviruses are basically little structures that's got a protein cover and a lipid layer inside that. And then they stick out like little spikes that stick out. And this is why they've got the name corona. Corona is like a halo, and these spikes are made up of little like matchstick-like proteins that stick up. And these so-called spike proteins have got 2 portions. There is the top portion, which consists of 3 different sections of protein. They are connected to the virus at the bottom, and the top part is called S1, and the second part here near the virus is called S2. The important thing for you to remember is the S1 portion is extremely, extremely toxic. I suppose we didn't know that when we started with this. We now have ample evidence that the S1 part of the protein and the S2 part has been genetically modified over years, but that's a topic for another day. Suffice to say, it's not a natural virus anymore. It has had gain of function on it, in other words, to make it more potent, more lethal. Question being, how does this thing get into our body? Now, this is actually quite simple. We all know that we get infected by natural infection from one person to the other, from certain contact surfaces, from liquids, body liquids, and so on. That's the one half. So you will get a virus into your body, and this virus has got this protein on the surface, and then it sits on your mucous membranes. It goes through all the different levels of your immune system if your immune system is not up to date. And then eventually it enters a cell, as we will look just now. The other way is through the back door. if you get an injection of basically a so-called vaccine, you come through the back door, you inject it straight into your system, and then you have spike protein in your system. And both times the results are much the same or very similar in any way. Okay, let's jump back and spend a bit of time how this virus gets onto your mucous membrane. Now, the bottom half of this screen is inside your cell. The top part is outside your cell. And there is one important receptor. It's called the ACE2 receptor. Don't worry about the name now, just remember ACE2. And the ACE2 receptor sticks up from the cell surface. It's very much like a doorknob when you want to open the door. So the virus will come near this receptor. The spike, the tip of the S1 part, will connect to the receptor, and then some enzymes will pop up and splice this holding mechanisms, and it's like a springy mechanism that will then pull the virus into the inside of the cell. So inside the virus is genetic material that'll be unraveled. The body's own components, the ribosomes, will then go and make more of certain enzymes. These enzymes, polymerase, will make more of the same strands, and eventually these strands will be replicated, producing parts of the virus that gets assembled, put together again, and when the virus has been done, he comes off the production line and he leaves the cell, and he's ready to infect either somebody else or even to infect you again in a different space. So this is the basic life cycle of a virus. Entry, the information's there, and then the body makes the virus components through this lot, and eventually it leaves and it makes many more. So this is the summary. You can read through it in your own time. I want to emphasize that for those who are interested, this seminar, or you could say this lecture, will be available in PDF format. At the end of this presentation, we will have our contact details. So if you contact us, we are ready to send you a PDF and email it to you or WhatsApp it to you. So here you are. This is how it works. The virus connects to the ACE receptor, gets pulled into the body. The genetic material is replicated, made more of, and then eventually a new virus is released, or many new viruses are released, and behind it leaves a dying cell because the cell is exhausted. It basically gets destroyed, and when a cell gets exhausted and it's making virus, the immune system is activated and it'll also start killing these cells. That was a natural way. The second one, as we've mentioned before, is experimental mRNA therapies. So how does it work? An artificial piece of genetic code that is supposed to make the spike protein is fabricated in a laboratory, and that is packed into a little oil bubble, and when the oil bubble comes onto the surface of the cell, which is also an oil bubble, it's like two eyes on a soup, fatty eyes on a soup. These two will fuse, and then the genetic material is inserted in the cell. The ribosomes, the little factories, will read the genetic code, and they will make a long chain of amino acids which gets folded back, forth, and then eventually it makes a spike protein, which then gets pushed to the outside of the cell and sticks out from the cell. We can call it the spike protein is expressed on the cell surface. So you introduce genetic material into your body cell and then fools the body to make this toxic protein, and eventually it sits on the surface of the cell. And this is the idea, that we have then all antibodies attacking the sticking out spike proteins. Once again, the summary in a text. So it's artificial genetic code, and this will make the S spike protein. It is stabilized by adding certain artificial component. Why is that important? Because it's artificially, it's like plastic, and it's not like wood. Plastic lasts for years and years, while wood is degraded. Normal mRNA will be degraded in the body within minutes or hours. This artificial genetic code cannot be degraded very quickly, and there is research out that it stays for weeks or even months in your body. The second thing is the lipid nanoparticle, which is like a little oil bubble, and this oil bubble is also not good and has shown to be pathogenic in many ways. So we've got several components. We've got the mRNA, which is not good for the body. We've got the lipid nanoparticle, and of course the third one that this whole talk is all about is the spike protein. So now we've gone through the steps on how the spike gets into us. What does it do there and what are the results? Here's a brief summary. Number one, we all know that when we got COVID or after the vaccine, there was extreme inflammation in many cases. We've also heard about the blood clot. The blood clots start because the inside of the blood vessel has been damaged. When the inside of a blood vessel has been damaged, it starts coagulating. The blood attaches to it and it forms a blood clot. This is the same thing if you cut yourself with a knife, the inside of the vessel gets damaged. It's a natural reaction to then start clotting. And this is a natural phenomenon. In this case, however, it takes place all over the body and it's extreme. The damage to the lung, I don't think we need to speak much about it. We all know that. The damage to the heart, lots has been said. The science is actually very clear, and yet many people still don't want to look at it, and many people don't see that. The damage to the brain. If we have extreme inflammation and the spike protein can get into the brain, as we will see later, it'll also cause inflammation in the brain. The simple symptom is a headache. The more extreme symptoms is confusion, brain fog, inability to think clearly, inability to sleep, anxiety, depression. All these things show that the brain's not working properly, and we call it neural inflammation, nerve inflammation in the brain. We also now know that it damages the gut. In fact, the virus stays around in the gut for many, many months. In certain cases, it damages the nerves. So you've got tingly fingers, you've got tingly feet, you've got neuralgias, extreme pain in certain segments of the nerves. And then last but not least, very important, it continuously damages our immune system. So when the immune system is damaged over time, we can expect more infections, more viral infections, continuous disease, people that pick up any bug that comes past, and then ultimately either autoimmune disease or cancer. Because cancer, we all have cancer cells in our body. You could say from our 10th to 15th year onwards, you can actually see them. The only thing that keeps cancer at bay is our immune system. And if our immune system gets destroyed, we will have cancers in very young people, which are unheard of up to now. So here are the articles. As I've said to you, I will show you the article. Remember, you will have this in PDF, so I'm going to run through this a bit faster than I would normally do it. At the bottom, you've got your reference, so you can go back, or you can send this to your doctor friend or scientific friend, and he can look at this for his own perusal. This is what the article says. Very simply, the results suggest that COVID spike protein activates signaling to induce pro-inflammatory response in murine, that is mice, and human macrophages. Now, macrophages are part of our immune system. They're very important, and if they are triggered invariably, it eventually damages them. Another article, the damage to the blood vessels. So remember I said the virus binds to ACE2 receptors, and there are many, many ACE2 receptors all over our body, especially on the inside of our blood vessels. So you can see from this already that the spike protein will go everywhere, virtually where there is a blood supply. When people ask me, where does the spike protein go? It doesn't go. I normally say, okay, where doesn't it go? I suppose it goes into the enamel of your teeth. It doesn't go into your hair, and it probably doesn't go into your fingernails because there is no blood supply. But for the rest of the body, you will probably have spike protein circulating. Okay. So it can damage vascular endothelial cells. That's the inside lining of your blood vessel. And the inside lining of your blood vessels is a huge space. It also damages the blood-brain barrier. So this is the little vessel in the brain. And between the vessel and the side of the brain, there is a blood-brain barrier. But the blood-brain barrier gets ruptured, and everything that's in the blood, either spike proteins, other toxins, can get into your brain. And that is something that we definitely not want. Then we've got other vessels. We call it junctional epithelium, where this cell and that cell are joined together, and this gets disrupted, and then the stuff can leak out. The result, if a blood vessel is damaged, we have got excessive blood clots all over the place. And thrombosis means if the little blood vessels get clogged up, we've got massive inflammation, and we've got pulmonary damage because the liquid from the blood can now leak into the lungs. And we've seen that during the acute phase of COVID, many people ended up in ICUs with all the resulting effects. The spike protein has the ability, and this is an article, here I've got the reference here. The spike proteins has got a lot of positive charges on its surface. Now this is the spike protein of the original Wuhan virus. It's got certain charges. The alpha version had more charges, the delta version more, and the Omicron even more. So the result is, if you've got red blood cells and they have all negative charges, they repel each other. It's two magnets with the wrong ends facing to each other. They push each other apart. But when you put a spike protein near it, and it's called a trimer because it consists of three little blobs of protein, plus a negative attract each other, so it'll coagulate. They will all be pulled together. And this is one part of clotting formation. This is interesting research that came out from South Africa. Once again, the references are there. They call fibrin microclots. So in normal day language, this means really tough blood clots that are abnormal and don't look like normal blood clots. Also, they cannot be dissolved, and healthy fibrinolysis return to health. Failed fibrinolysis, thrombotic event, leakage, low tissue. So what they've shown here, the spike protein attacks the fibrinogen. You get fibrin clots. They look like long strings of fiber inside the blood clots, and they cannot be dissolved. This is a video of a patient 2 months after vaccination. He is on anticoagulant therapy, and this blood is 60 minutes after we put it under microscope. Here's a white blood cell moving through this blood clot. You can see all the red blood cells are clogged. This person is on anticoagulant therapy, and some of the blood looks normal like here, and some of the blood looks horrific. You can imagine what happens if this gets into your brain or somewhere in your heart. It's just a disastrous situation, because it will clog up all the little vessels, and you'll either have a stroke or you might have a heart attack. When a person dies like that and you have a post-mortem done, we have seen these extreme clotting systems being pulled out of the big vessels. Now, for all of us that have watched an animal being slaughtered in Namibia on a farm or something, this doesn't look normal. It looks like somebody that has injected silicone into these vessels. So you can imagine if that happens to a person, the chances of survival is very remote, and he needs drastic medical attention, acute medical attention. So here we look at the nerve issues. Neuropathic symptoms, and after vaccination, there's the article. Peripheral neuropathies, meaning in your hands and feet. Sensory and autonomic dysfunction, specific type of nerves, they get dysregulated. So in conclusion, we can see there's an increasing number of studies that show nerve side effects. The most frequent are, of course, headaches, Guillain-Barré syndrome, your nerves get damaged bit by bit, and venous sinus thrombosis, which is a massive blood clot inside your brain, and then transverse myelitis, meaning that the myelin sheath on your nerves get damaged and are highly inflamed. So once again, this is a case of a patient with encephalitis, inflammation of the brain and inflammation of the heart. He went for a post-mortem, and then they found periventricular vasculitis, in other words, in the heart, and they also found inflammation in the brain tissue. All these little blue dots are inflammatory cells. They should not be there. This is the blood vessel. Perivascular, meaning around the vessel. There should be no inflammatory cells around the vessels in a healthy heart or healthy brain. In both these cases, we've got a lot of inflammation around these things. This is a copy and paste. The findings corroborate the correlative role of gene-based vaccine. It's supposed that it was a vaccine-induced damage to the organ as well. Now, quite honestly, whether it's the vaccine or whether it's the virus, the moment you get the spike protein into your body, you have a problem. And we will look at that later on. Okay, so the spike protein causes cardiovascular disease independent of viral infection. What does it mean? It means it's not the virus. And they did some studies here where they actually took just the spike protein and injected it, and they found that that was enough to make the person sick. This is heart muscle, same story. You've got all these inflammatory cells, and you've also got damaged heart tissue here. So if your heart is inflamed, you have got a problem. Blood vessel damage, you can see here as the virus. They actually extracted just the spike proteins in this article, and they used them. Pericyte is a cell that is around the vessel here, and they caused inflammation, and they basically showed in this article that it affects the brain, the eye, the retina, affects your heart, affects your muscles, and then also your kidneys. Those are all systems and structures that have got very, very fine vessels. So that would make sense. Now let's jump back and look at our mitochondria. Now, our mitochondria, those of you who had biology at school might remember, others might not, it doesn't matter. This is a cell in our body. There's the nucleus, there's our DNA, there is endoplasmic reticulum, and all these little bodies, a Golgi body here. And these goodies here are mitochondria. Now, mitochondria are ancient bacteria that have gone into these cells, and they've formed like a partnership. They are the brain and the cell. They organize everything, and also they make the power that the cell needs. We've got the highest density of mitochondria in the brain and the heart, the immune system, our liver, kidney, pancreas, and muscles. Why? Because these structures use the most energy. So, and the spike protein attacks the mitochondria straight on. It really damages them. The second problem that we have is that many of the medications that we give patients to treat them for COVID, anti-inflammatories, antibiotics, and many, many others, also damage mitochondria. So we want to help these people and alleviate their symptoms. And yet, in the process, we cause more trouble. I've given you this analogy here. So this is a drawing of your cell. This is a mitochondrion. Look at all the mechanisms and the chemicals that it's involved in. This is the surface of the cell. A certain trigger or chemical gets to it, and then all these mechanisms start acting. And the mitochondria here, there are many of them, are the brain box, and we can say the biological control of the factory. They also are the manpower, and they are the, you could say, the internet of the cell, organizing everything. So what do they do? Number one, we've got immune coordination. They switch on and off immune cells. They fabricate certain chemicals and molecules. This is a big one. They're part and parcel of our metabolism. As I say, when there's a power shed or load shedding, these are the little Honda generators that keep us going. They manage cell mechanisms and cell metabolism. Mitochondrial DNA is passed on just by the mother virtually, so they're important in genetics. If mitochondrial DNA gets damaged, the daughters and all the offspring of that mother will have damaged DNA, because mitochondrial DNA cannot be repaired very well. They also switch on the cleanup system. If mitochondria or cells are not functioning normally anymore, they say, hang on, you've had your time. Let's clean you up. Let's take you apart. It's like a chop shop for old cars. They take them apart and build new ones. In other words, mitochondria can grow, and they will also remove old, simple, or defective mitochondria and cells. And this is what I say, immune coordination and cell signaling. So these are the main functions. Another article, if the mitochondria don't work very well, then we have got brain problems, and a prelude to neuropathologist of SARS-CoV-2. So this whole article explains in big detail why, if the mitochondria get damaged, your brain takes a hit. And once we understand this, everything becomes much more easy to understand and follow. And once we understand something, we can also start looking at possible solutions that we want to employ. So once again, Mitochondria are crucial for our immune system. If they don't work properly, we have early aging, and the whole anti-aging medicine is based on a concept that we call mitochondrial medicine. The mitochondria are the be-all and end-all of our health. Without them, we cannot be healthy. Okay, so how do we get from everything we see to long COVID? So long COVID is the long term. It basically gets kicked off the day we either get the virus or the day we receive the vaccine, because both of them have the same problematic toxic protein, and that sets off a whole avalanche of problems in our body, as we've seen. Normally, a body would get rid of some stuff like that, but in this case, it takes a long time to get rid of it, and it takes some of the structures that are involved in getting rid of it. So I've taken this article from the British Medical Journal, and basically I've used it because they've got really great graphics to show us. So if you want to, or if you want to show this to your friend, doctor friend, you can give him a reference. So here are some of the symptoms. Fatigue. You can't breathe properly, your heart is pounding, you can't hear or see or think properly, your sleep is disrupted. You have got certain depression, post-traumatic stress, muscle pain, concentrations, and of course, as we said, headaches. The connection is always, this is the virus, this is the spike protein connecting to ACE2, and then ACE2 is in all these organs. Take your time, or when you've got the PDF, take the time and look at it, and you will see exactly what it does in these organs. It's a pretty disturbing picture. But the good news is there is quite a lot that one can do to support your body, and this is what we'll get to in the end of this lecture. So here we are, the lung damage. Spike protein gets into the lung. It causes massive inflammation. These are the cytokines, the chemicals that get made. Here's a macrophage that tries to clean up the issue. In the process, the macrophage gets the spike protein and also gets damaged itself. So in other words, it can't do its job properly. If it's damaged, immune systems need macrophages and they need monocytes. Monocytes are inside the blood, and if they get into the tissue, they become macrophages. It's like the garbage truck that comes and cleans up the rubbish in the municipal areas. What is left behind is lots of fibrin, collagen tissues. Collagen is good, but too much collagen is bad. Remember, if you've got a lung, it has to expand, it has to exchange air, and for that it has to be elastic. Now, if it can't expand anymore, it's like a rugby ball where you have got a rubber blow-up bladder inside the leather thing, and this fiber stuff is like the leather around it, so your lung can't expand and you will struggle breathing. Let's jump to brain damage. So this is a nice graphic. Take your time. All the structures in the brain, these are immune cells. They're called microglial cells in the cell, and you've got brain inflammation, and it affects cognitive impairment, autonomic dysfunction, meaning all the things that the brain does automatically will be impaired. Hot and cold, digestion, breathing, everything that this part of the brain, the crocodile brain, does naturally will be affected. We then have nerve and muscle damage, and also psychological and social problems. At the top, we can see that everywhere is fatigue. These people feel exhausted, and that's really terrible because they cannot manage their normal day, and they end up feeling hopeless, feeling despondent. We've discussed the brain now, and now we go to the heart. And the heart is a really important organ. The heart is the start and the end of our life. It has to work 24/7 forever, 60, 80, 100 years, whatever we make in our timeline. And if you look at the spike protein, and we've heard that it causes massive inflammation. What it does in the heart, it goes between the cells. There are all these interleukins, and these are mediators of inflammations. They are chemicals that make basically and associated with inflammation. So also the nerve systems that control the heart get affected, and then we've got inflammatory cells between the heart. So we've got inflammatory, and then we get fibrocytes, which is like leather between the heart muscle, and you can imagine if a heart muscle is leathery, it can't pump properly anymore. One of the biggest problems is that the nerves inside the heart, from the top of the heart, the atrium, to the ventricles, there are lots of nerve bundles, and these nerve bundles is like a thick layer of fiber optic cable or electric cables that conducts impulses, and that also gets damaged by the inflammation, by the spike protein. So if that gets damaged, it's like having a mouse in your Toyota Hilux Bucky or Ford Bucky, and the mouse has eaten some cables. You can imagine the morning when you get in, the engine won't run properly. So if the connectivity is not available, if the conductivity between the top of the heart and the bottom, we get fibrillation. In other words, the heart doesn't pump properly anymore. It just vibrates, it virtually just shivers, and it cannot pump blood properly. So here we get to a really traumatic topic. Have you wondered why so many young and healthy people, many of them are super athletes, just keel over and die suddenly? And I went and looked at the available research. This is one article that sums up a whole lot of others. I think they used over 120 articles. Anyway, you have the reference here. And they looked at what the mechanisms were behind this. They went through all the different articles, and then they've highlighted and summarized the most important things. And they found that vaccine-induced myocarditis, in other words, vaccine-induced inflammatory heart conditions, primarily affect young males, and this risk was not seen after normal infection. So it was primarily seen after vaccination. Another factor that was important, hypercatecholaminergic, meaning there was lots of adrenaline together with the inflammation. So if you've got adrenaline and inflammation together, and this would happen if a person's on a field doing sports, competing, he will be stressed, there will be lots of adrenaline, and if he in that case has an inflamed heart, he will have a problem. They looked at epidemiology, they looked at autopsies and chemical analysis, and they found lots of adrenaline together with myocarditis, inflammation of the heart, is a critical trigger of these sudden death in elite male athletes. So what about the blood clots? And I just want to show you some differences here. We are talking about a blood clot, and a blood clot will start slowly closing the arteries. So the person will feel a bit groggy, he won't feel very well, but he will probably still have time to call somebody, to maybe get to hospital, and then they can do a scan and see what's going on. In most cases, these people can be resuscitated and they can be saved. If, however, you have this heart inflammation with lots of adrenaline, and as I've explained it, then the conductivity is, and this is sudden cardiac arrest, as they call it here, it's an electrical problem. It's not a heart attack. A heart attack is when the pipes get clogged up. It happens over years or months, or in the case of COVID, over days. You will have a couple of days in which you feel groggy and you can come in and call for help. This sudden happens very, very quickly. A typical case, and we've seen many and many of them, the person will just look strangely for a couple of seconds, fall over, start kicking. And in a situation like this, where the medics are around, they've got defibrillators, they've got the right equipment, they will shock the heart into proper rhythm again, and they might be able, in most cases, to save this person. Another situation, if you are on stage, and remember, on a stage, in front of big crowds of people, no matter how often you've done it, it's always a state where you've got lots of adrenaline flowing. If you've had a vaccine, or if you've had COVID and you've got an underlying inflammation in your heart muscles, chances are you can end up in a situation where you just keel over, look at the eyes of the person, she's actually out on her feet, she will just fall down and start kicking, and that's the end of it. Unless there is medical help, sophisticated medical help. There's a third situation, and this is a very tragic one. If you have the same situation in your heart, and you go to bed in the evening and you might say, I'm not feeling great, but anyway, let me go and sleep, I'll be better tomorrow. During the night, we go into deep sleep, and in the early mornings hours, between 4 and 5 o'clock, when we actually wake up, the normal physiology is that we have a rush of adrenaline when we wake up. And if you're in your own home and if nobody is around and you have that situation, there will be nobody to save you. And this is what has happened to many, many people, at least according to this research here. That is the mechanism that they think. So we've spent quite a lot of time. We've looked through many, many different situations, and we actually have got a good idea what the spike protein does to our body. So what can we expect in the next couple of years? And when I say that, I go back, remember this reference. It's a summary of over 1,000 peer-reviewed scientific articles. So it's not Martin Wucher telling the story. All I've done is I've scratched this together. I spent, you could say, hundreds of hours to compile stuff like this. And I've put it together for everyone to get a better idea of where we are at the moment. So the research is there and the science is pretty clear. We can expect things from the immune system. That's autoimmune disease, the allergies, skin issues, repeated infection. If you think about it, how many of your friends and family, people that you know have got these things? We've got cancer flare-ups and metastasis. And I've said novel cancers in younger patients. We see younger and younger patients getting, they call them turbo cancers, because the immune system is destroyed. They cannot fight cancer anymore. And cancer treatments, yes, maybe they will help. I think we need to be more proactive and start early on. In other words, look at support programs that can possibly ameliorate the situation. I've spoken about the mitochondrial DNA and that it gets passed on by the ovum, by the mother. And of course, if the mRNA gets into other body cells, it definitely, and the science is out, gets into your reproductive tissues. Okay, and this is what we see. We've got infertility, we've got problems with the fetuses, and we've got birth defects in certain cases. There's also immune burnout in the end. Hyperthrombotic state really means abnormal blood clotting. So once again, it can be sudden adult death. We can have microclots. Your feet will feel funny and cold. Your feet will have pins and needles because they don't get enough blood. And the microvessels in these organs, especially the kidneys, the retina, the eyes, the back of the eye, sometimes in the brain, they get damaged. So if that happens, and I've had patients that I saw, they had their fingernails falling off. They had their hair falling out. Now, why would that be? Because the blood supply to these structures at a certain stage was so disrupted that they couldn't get enough blood and they basically fell out. And once you think about the mechanisms and you understand the mechanisms, it is easier to follow the pathology behind all this. We spent a lot of time talking about the mitochondrial damage. So mitochondria influence the inflammation. They make reactive oxygen species. Now that is free radicals in your body and they make acid. They don't function well, your energy pathways don't work well, you will be more in a glycolytic. In other words, you will use more sugary stuff, which is the system that you have when you've got cancer. It'll downregulate oxidative phosphorylation, which is when you have lots of oxygen, when you're healthy. Apoptosis, to get rid of old cancerous cells, doesn't work, so they grow longer. And then the impact is highest in the tissues with lots of mitochondria, which is brain and kidneys and stuff like that. So tissue damage, we spent a lot of time talking about that. We have blood vessel damage, we have collapse of regeneration, lung tissue becomes harder and more leather-like, nerve tissues and the organs one after the other because they're all interlinked struggle. Because the one goes down, the whole system goes down. Extreme immune activation is at the beginning of COVID. We've all heard about the cytokine storm. That is when the immune system completely overreacts. We also have new autoimmune disease. In that case, the immune system attacks the body itself. Immune burnout and immune senescence. Immune burnout means if the immune system basically packs up. Senescence is when you get older, and as older people have got less of an immune system, and then we have more cancers and these things popping up. If the immune system turns against your own body, it can cause neurodegenerate nerve damage, and you have nerve destruction, And then, of course, if your immune system doesn't work, the chances of catching COVID are increased, or any other virus for that matter. We've had lots of people with Epstein-Barr viruses. We've had herpes viruses popping out. Herpes is a virus that we get as youngsters. Normally, our immune system manages it, and then it stays around in some of our nerves, and it only comes out if our immune system is down. So in this case, our immune system has taken a knock, and now these viruses come out again. So what can we do? The big question. The easy way out is to stick your head in the sand and say everything will be fine, the government will help us. Okay. I think we don't need to talk about that much more. We've seen what comes from that type of thinking. Quite honestly, I think the more we get involved ourselves and look after our own health, the better for everybody. In many cases, we've been sold straight out lies. We've had information provided to us which was completely false, manipulated, and so on. But that's over now. If you are prepared to look, there is enough information out that gives you a different perspective. If you don't want to do that, it's fine. Please also go and have a look. This is a very, very interesting video. Go and have a look at it. I've included it here because I found it extremely valuable, and I think it'll tell us a lot of things that we should do in the future. When we have a medical problem, we have different type of medical interventions for different scenarios. We need them all. First of all, there's the acute stuff, and this is conventional medicine. Say you're in a car accident, you've got a broken leg, a broken hip, whatever. You go to a big center, you get scanned, and you get diagnosed with what's happening. They stop the acute bleeding and so on, and they stitch you together, and then you are going to heal by yourself if everything goes well. Once you've done that, there should be a second type of medicine, and this is the type of medicine that provides support programs, and this is the type of medicine that will give your body a better chance of doing what it does best. In other words, it can heal. So if we want to learn from nature, we can go back to these old living organisms. Old baobabs are estimated of being around 3,000 to 3,500 years old. Imagine, in their time, they can't run away, they can't bite, they don't have hands and teeth to defend themselves. They've had to create chemical substances that kept bacteria at bay, that kept viruses at bay, that limited birds and monkeys and elephants eating them, and they've done that extremely well. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because we as humans have got the opportunity to use some of these plant-based substances and use them as antiviral or anti-protein, toxic protein substances that we encounter in this situation. This artificial tree here with an antenna in the middle is not going to do the job of healing. So we go back to nature, and we can start with really basic questions. If you have a piece of forest that looks like this, and you want to rehabilitate this thing, what is the first thing you do? And I've asked this question hundreds, possibly thousands of times, and every single person that I asked came up with the right answer. They said, we first have to clean up. And once we've got to that point, we say, okay, what will you clean up? And they look at us a bit silly, and we actually get, after a bit of discussion, we get to the issue that you have to remove the man-made stuff. You don't have to worry that much about the dead fish and the branches and twigs and leaves here. You have to remove plastics and man-made stuff, and then you can walk away, and you can leave it for a year or 2 or 3 or 5. And guess what? When you come back, chances are that this is a green and healthy forest again. Okay, so it starts in the mind. You have to have the information, and you have to switch on your thinking cap. And you start with lifestyle and diet. Now, we've seen through the last 3 years that diet and lifestyle is crucially important. The second thing here is S1, spike protein avoidance. Yes, of course, you have to stay away from a sick person, or if you are sick with some viral infection, go home, lie in your bed, and heal like you would normally have done with any other viral infection. So that is common sense. And then, of course, after all you've seen now, make very sure you don't get more spike protein in any other way. So the proactive strategies are your knowledge. It's an antiviral lifestyle and immune optimization. This is all stuff you can do at home. Where you need some help might be that if you want to get therapeutically involved or supportly involved, in other words, to neutralize some of these proteins, to boost your immune system and actually to get your mitochondria working again. This is what I would call functional medicine. Then emergency medicine is important because, as I've said, we have got situations where we are in life and death situations. And then, of course, you don't start with supplements and you don't start with lifestyle medicine. You need emergency medicine to keep you alive. And there we are very well, in Namibia, we're well supported with this. There are many institutions that can help us with that. All right, let's go back to basics. The key element that causes all this, the key that unlocks the disease processes is the spike protein. So I've tried to sum this up and say, okay, initially when we got COVID, there was a cytokine storm. I call it an immune tsunami. We've had lots of abnormal blood clots, and for the first 7 days to 10 days to 14 days, maybe 3 weeks sometimes, we had to battle to stay alive. And in many, many cases, the majority of people managed to do that. Then we went to a second burnout. This might have been a week or 2 or 3. Might have been a month or 2 or 3. Because your mitochondria are damaged to such an extent that they can't work properly, we're in a zone of misery. And then the long term, the long COVID issues really come down to damage to our blood vessels, damage to our heart, damage to our brain, and all the things we've spoken about. And the most sinister one is that our immune system is taken a knock. And when the immune system has taken a knock, we can say we're in turbo aging. In other words, if we can't regenerate, if we can't protect ourselves from pathogens and toxins, we will age faster and we will die sooner. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand this. This is common sense. So how do we approach this? The first thing we try and do is giving you advice and techniques and methods to optimize your blood flow. The second part that we want to do is we want to clean up the spike protein. Remember, the spike protein is like sand in a gearbox. Wherever it goes, it causes trouble. And we have to try and get hold of the stuff and try and get it out of our system. We also have to be conscious about what normal drugs do to our mitochondria. And I've often spoken about this also to my medical colleagues. They live in a world where they give lots of, you could say, effective medicines that help the patient in the short run, but most of them or many of them have got detrimental effects on our mitochondria. The fourth point is that we have to rebuild our immune system, and there are many ways to do that. All that is based on our foundation of mitochondrial regeneration. You could say mitochondrial medicine. And this whole map that I've laid out here for you is based in systems biology. In other words, we've got multiple or many billion systems that all work together, from processes in a cell to intercells to interorgan to everything. It's like a big city that has to run together. I've pulled out 17 substances, medications, supplements, whatever you want to use them, or whatever you want to call them. And I'm going to go through them bit by bit. Very briefly, I will just show you in the standard method. I'll show you research articles. I'll give you a summary, and then I might add some comments. So let's start with ivermectin. Lots has been said of ivermectin. I don't want to go into politics here. Ivermectin is probably the most effective and number one intervention that you can use against this virus. It works for many, many other viruses, but in this case, it definitely has its place, and it's worth doing it, especially because it's incredibly safe. And no matter if you call it a horse dewormer or whatever, it's one of the fundamental interventions that could support you. This is from the article. I've just taken copy and paste so you can read it in peace and quiet. You can show it to your doctor friend if you want to, if he's interested. And this is another copy and paste. If you look at it, there are 16 different mechanisms where this old drug basically intervenes and prevents COVID damage in your body. The next one is a similar one. It's also been used for many, many years. It's antiviral, it's anti-inflammatory, it's been used for many, many years. It's one of the safest drugs around if you use it correctly. Once again, there is lots of international research out there that you can pull up and look. This stuff was early in 2020. That was just when it all started. and already they knew that it was working. So where were these articles when we needed them most? This is my big question. Another one, and this is the copy and paste stuff from it. You can read it. Peace and quiet. Remember, when you watch the video, you can always go to pause and then read it quietly, and then you can see how amazing this stuff is. Vitamin D is, look, there are no silver bullets in vitamins. They're all important and they all have their place. But if you ever had a silver bullet, it would be vitamin D. And vitamin D levels of 60 to 80 nanograms per mil are the optimal levels. In fact, some research shows that once your vitamin D levels get higher than 60 nanograms per mil, chances of you getting a viral infection or ending up in hospital is minimal. So vitamin D also immunomodulates. In other words, it balances your immune system. It makes it strong where you want it strong, and it calms it down where you don't want it too strong. It also makes your immune system to a more telerogenic phenotype. In other words, it's an anti-aging type of effect that it has. Vitamin D deficiency is very common in autoimmune disease. This is just one graph for our medical and biological friends and colleagues. Vitamin D in the middle, look at all the immune cells and how it actually influences them. It increases the ones that calm the immune system down. It makes the others stronger that we want stronger. So lots and lots of articles in January 2023. Now this is from Switzerland, January 2023. So it's recent stuff. It's only been about 3 or 4 months old. So you can have a look at this. Once again, it showed that if it's used correctly and not try to prove something wrong, vitamin D has its place and it has a significant outcome on the end result. NAC or NAC, his real name is N-acetylcysteine. Here are some, and remember, the article always says the potential mechanisms of N, and then they carry on to prove that it works. So why would they say potential mechanisms? I suspect if they don't say potential mechanism, if they make as if it works, then this article might not get published. So scientists that want to publish articles have gone to, you could say, interesting semantics to get their article published. This is the content here. Basically, it reduces cytokine storm. The antiviral effect may also benefit. It helps in sepsis, severe burns, liver failure, and also it cleans up the lungs. It gets rid of your thick mucus. It's easier to cough it out. It cleans up your blood. It makes your blood thinner and lets them flow more easily. So here we have it as preventive systems and also as additional therapy for COVID. So another article, it creates glutathione. It's the precursor for glutathione. And glutathione is the most potent, you could say, antioxidant that our body has. So it'll help with COVID and it control its lethal complications, including lung and everything. An interesting part, quercetin is a plant substance. It comes from plants. Another one is luteolin. They're inhibitors of certain RNA-dependent polymerase. Remember when I showed you that the viral genetics get into the cell, the first thing that gets made is a polymerase, and the polymerase is like a little photocopy machine that makes more of the same viral genetics. So if it inhibits the polymerase, it inhibits the manufacture of the photocopy machine. It's a little bit like zinc. Zinc inhibits the polymerase. So it's like zinc is like throwing sand into the photocopy machine, and therefore it can't make more copies of the genetic code of the virus. Basically, both compounds completely inhibited the enzyme at 100 micromoles with an inhibition of more than 80% at 25. So 80% inhibition at that light concentration and a high concentration, 100%. So the stuff is potent. Vitamin C, even I think even school kids know that vitamin C is good for you. These are old articles. Remember, they come from 2013, and it was with the first H3N3 infection, the stages. In this case, it's basically influenza. Vitamin C is crucial for your immune system. It really helps your immune response. It helps your collagen production and so on. Melatonin. Mitochondria make a lot of melatonin, and melatonin has been found extremely useful for especially the brain. And here we have it, a nice graphic It stimulates some immune cells. It stops the cytokine storm. It prevents anxiety, depression, and sleeplessness. It also stops oxidative stress. It stops this protein, which in case then causes internal problems. Guess what? Melatonin stops the spike protein binding to ACE2 receptors and also to a CD147 receptor. So melatonin will stop the virus holding onto the doorknob, and it'll stop the spike protein holding onto the doorknob, and that'll create a lot of prevention for your cells. It's anti-inflammatory. It's antifibrotic. In other words, it prevents leather being formed in the tissue. It's antiviral. It stops the virus. It's like a antioxidant, and it's psychotropic. In other words, it calms you down and it keeps you sane. Low dose naltrexone. Naltrexone is an old drug that blocks opiate receptors. And once opiate receptors are blocked in your brain overnight, and this is what one can do with low dose naltrexone, you need to ask your doctor. Then you wake up in the morning and the body has made more endorphins, its own immune boosters, its own immune regulators. And once it's done that, you can say that a lot of the normal symptoms of chronic inflammation, of encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and niacin are relieved. And it's a really, really safe drug. It costs very little, and people have used it for years and years and years without any detrimental effect. So here I've used it in long COVID. It's one of the recommended treatments for long COVID at this stage. Normal conclusions: it's safe in patients. Ask your doctor about it. If your doctor doesn't know about it, tell him to look it up. If he doesn't want to do it, try and find another source that can help you. Artemisinin. Artemisia is a plant-based property or plant-based substance. Comes from Artemisia annua. It's a plant that grows in Africa, in Asia, and also I think in South America. It's a really, really bitter thing, but it works well. It has been used for malaria and for other diseases. And guess what? If you look at the research, and this is in silico is computerized molecular docking studies, and they found that it can inhibit COVID attachment to membrane fusion, and it can prevent the virus and the spike protein getting inside the cell, and also once inside the cell, it can stop it in its tracks. Here's a nice graphic. You can look at it in time. So I'm going to move on. You can either stop your video, or you can get the PDF if you want to. Serrapeptase, that's an enzyme. It's similar to meat tenderizer. Now, meat tenderizer is papain. Papain comes from a papaya, and it basically chomps up proteins. It makes them soft. So serrapeptase comes from bacteria that live inside the silkworm. And when the silk moth has spun a cocoon and the little pupae is inside there and it turns into a butterfly or a moth and it wants to come out, it cannot get out because silk is very, very strong. And then it starts secreting serrapeptidase. And the serrapeptidase dissolves the silk to make a little window, and the moth can come out. And this stuff has been used in surgery, post-operative, in many, many cases, and it has been found useful. Serrapeptase basically can thin your blood, can thin spike proteins, can dissolve spike proteins, and help you clear the stuff up. There you are. It makes your saliva elastic, it cleans your airways, and it's just incredible. It calms down the cytokine storms, cleans your lungs, cleans your blood, and also it inhibits the TMS receptor in the ACE connection to the virus here. You can see at the top. The article may be a promising. I don't want to say it is, although the research show it works. But anyway, that's semantics, and I've tried to tell you why it is. It's a very, very, how can I say, very, very soft, natural, and easy way to do it. Important is you have to use it with an empty stomach, because otherwise the serrapeptase will start chomping up the proteins that you eat, and it doesn't get into your systems where you want it. Nattokinase is another enzyme. We call them proteolytic enzymes, meaning they eat up proteins. And this has been shown to degrade the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. September 2020, at the end of the pandemic, this research came out. Please remember, when we see stuff like this, we should really pay attention, and we should try and maybe open our minds and use what nature has provided for us. Nattokinase has been used for many, many years to thin your blood instead of drug blood thinners. It's worked extremely well. In fact, so much so that in certain cases it has been found to actually clear plaques in big cardiovascular diseased arteries and veins. Okay, bromelain comes from a pineapple. It's a enzyme. It inhibits SARS-CoV-2 infection by blocking ACE2 and the enzyme that sets off the internalization of the spike protein. So once again, let's just go back. This was December 2020, very early on. Why did we not hear about this? We only had to find out after the story. Once again, profound fibrinolytic. In other words, it can thin your blood. Remember those blood clots? It helps dissolve those blood clots. And this is what we want. And also stops concentration. Binding of the spike protein was inhibited. So this is great. If you mix bromelain and NAC, it becomes even better. Synergistically, they inactivate SARS-CoV-2. The time is, I haven't got a date, March 21. Okay, so here we've got the excerpts, the cut and paste experts. So remember, it's not me saying this, it's in the article. And it explains what they do. They break the glycoproteins by breaking off glycosidic linkages and disulfide bonds. The NAC breaks disulfide bonds. The bromelain breaks the glycosidic linkages. So it actually chops up the molecules that are causing trouble in our body. Chlorine dioxide. Now, chlorine dioxide is a very controversial thing. Let's keep all the politics away. You could say in most food industries, chlorine dioxide is used to clean the factory. Chlorine dioxide is the stuff that you buy in a hiking shop when you want to go on a trail where you don't have clean water. Say you want to climb the Brandberg Mountain or you go the Fish River Canyon. We've got these water cleaning tablets. You stick them on the water, you leave it for 10 minutes, and then you can drink the water. Why? Because the stuff kills everything that shouldn't be alive in that water, and it makes the water safe for human consumption. So irrespective of what you hear on the internet, chlorine dioxide works, it's safe, it inhibits the binding of COVID and spike protein. It inactivates the binding, so in other words, it dissolves it, and it can be used to clean up the spike protein. I haven't put those articles in, but that is research that's out there. Resveratrol is a plant product, comes from red apples. There is always the story, red wine has got resveratrol, it makes you younger, but you have to drink about 20 liters of red wine a day to actually get the benefit, so there are other ways to get it, so don't try the wine route. February 21 inhibits that virus and SARS-CoV-2 corona replication in vitro, in other words, in a science lab. If it works in a science lab, there is a good chance it also works in cells itself. So they used artificial drugs, chloroquine and resveratrol, and the latter showed the best results and no or reduced cytotoxicity. So here we've got another article, 2020. So it was earlier on. We knew that earlier on. Where was the stuff when we needed it? So it stops the SARS-CoV-2 virus because it stops the binding. It's stimulating of the immune system and down-regulating of the cytokine storm. It promotes certain transcription factors in your cell, and it increases the potency of T lymphocytes and our natural killer cells, and those ones we need to clean up the virus. Dandelion leaf extract, a beautiful little flower called Pterosacum officinalis. You take the leaves and their leaf extracts, and you can buy this stuff in the health shops. And you take a couple of drops every day, it'll definitely help. When I saw this earlier on, I thought, well, can this be true? And I found many, many articles where this has been tried and tested, and it seems to be really helpful in a very safe way. The blocking the interaction, remember the spike protein to the ACE2 receptor. You know all the mechanisms now, and you can show that infections of the lung cell and spike delta and pseudo were efficiently prevented by the extract. And interleukin 6, which is a cytokine which makes inflammation and makes you feel miserable, was stopped by that as well. What is grounding? Very simple. If your skin touches the ground, that can be directly, either by walking barefoot or by using grounding mats. Now, grounding mats are rubber or any substance or any mat that one can buy and you can put them on your bed, you can sleep on them, and they are connected via a cable to a little copper rod outside. Now, if you tell that to people, they think you're loony, but it's okay, it doesn't matter. If you go back, remember I showed you the red blood cells. If they've got lots of negative electrons around them, they repel each other. They don't clump together. Now, we've also seen then when you add the spike protein that they start clumping together. But if you add enough negative electrons, they are antioxidants. If you add electrons, you're actually taking an antioxidant. The fact is that the biggest electron donor that we have is the Earth itself. Every bolt of lightning that hits the Earth knocks into the surface, and the electrons, just like they do on the red blood cells, get distributed all around the Earth. And if you touch with your feet onto the Earth, your body will absorb electrons, and it'll help to dissolve these lumpy blood clots. So here's some research, August 2020, prevention and treatment of COVID by earthing. So what they did in the ICU, they took some patients, and all they did is they connected basically an earth wire to their hands or feet, whatever, and they did the rest they carried on. And they found a marked difference in the reaction. So then we get to methylene blue. Now, methylene blue is a drug. It's a chemical drug that's been around since 1876. It was developed as a dye for cotton, and this is the stuff that makes our jeans go blue. And methylene blue has got a long track record. It was used antimicrobial. It was one of the first antibiotics used in the First World War. It has also been used against malaria and against certain parasites. It has been used against urinary tract infections, all sorts of things. So anyone interested, go and Google and find out a bit more about methylene blue. The fantastic part of it boosts your mitochondria. And remember, we've spoken about mitochondria a lot. So if your mitochondria have taken a knock, methylene blue will help them to get back onto their feet. And also it's neuroprotective. So it protects your brain. And in some cases, it gets used for anti-Alzheimer's. Some people promote it for Parkinson's disease and so on. And this is not something that you will find in standard medicine, but there is lots of research out there so that one can say with confidence there is something to it. There are a couple of caveats here. You can't use it if you're on antidepressants. You shouldn't use it if you've got certain enzyme defects. So please get your doctor and ask your doctor to look into this. If not, find one that can do and help you with that. So what we see here, methylene blue inhibited the entry of SARS spike-bearing soda-virus, and so they used a different virus and they added the spike protein just to test. That's why they call it a pseudovirus, and they often use it with light. What's also interesting, methylene blue was used when AIDS was ramping, because we had blood donors that we didn't know had AIDS or not, and then the blood transfusion services, at least in Europe and America, they mixed it with methylene blue, a solution, and they activated it by light. And this light basically destroyed the HIV proteins, and therefore they could sort of clean the blood of these patients. In this test, remember, we've got ACE2 to SARS-CoV-2 binding and an 80% inhibition. In other words, if you add methylene blue, that virus will struggle to bind to the cell. Remember, he won't have a doorknob to hold on, and when he hasn't got a doorknob to hold on, he cannot get into the cell. And whether it's a whole virus or whether it's just a spike protein, the effect is equally beneficial. So here they've tested on SARS-CoV and on the swine flu, H1N1 virus. Okay? And they did it without UV activation. If you want it more potent, you can do it with UV light. So basically, you would use methylene blue, and then you could sit in the sun for a bit every day, only maybe 10-15 minutes, take your shirt off, whatever, and that'll help. This is fascinating stuff, and it's stuff that we haven't heard anywhere in the public domain. So I feel confident that in this package, you will find something that might interest you and might help you to actually take your life in a different direction if you have long COVID. So let's summarize what we've said. First of all, we have to get our blood optimized, and there are many other procedures, cold showers, massages, but that is part and parcel of a customized support program that you might get from your healthcare provider. I've basically taken out the substances that I've spoken about, and I said which are good for optimizing circulation, and you've got the ones here that are in green. Then the next one is we want to get rid of the spike protein. That is the common sense. It's like taking the sand out of your gearbox or the metal shavings, cleaning up, adding new oil into the system. And all these substances here in green will help clean up spike protein. Then we want to re-energize our immune system, because if the immune system is not working properly, we are going to be in a really difficult sphere for many, many years. So once again, the green substances will help you with that. And then your mitochondria. Those are our little hunter generators. Let's give them some new fuel. Let's clean them up. Let's optimize them. And then again, into that part where these supplements can be used, you will need to adapt your lifestyle. You will go new ways with your diet, with your exercise, movement, getting sunlight, getting fresh air, trying to manage your stress levels, and. So there are many, many things you can do, but don't just sit and wait. Don't just sit and wait. If you have the feeling that either COVID or a vaccination has done something to you that makes you feel not as you were beforehand, get help, get active, and learn to take the initiative to go and look for new solutions. If you need any help, we are in Windhoek. I'll show you the address now. You can phone us on reception. You can email us, and we'll get back to you. You can always have a choice, and you should have a choice to ask questions, to say your say, and to stick with your constitutional rights, especially here in Namibia. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this video. It is a bit long, but then the topics are very complex. I tried to compile it into something that you can use. It's got a lot of detail, but it's also got some, you could say, pearls that you can take away and go home and basically use for yourself or for your loved ones. Thank you so much, and have an amazing day.